A black girl was tortured on flight until she passed out. Then, the crew freezes when her CEO dad arrives. Go back to Africa. Their words exploded through seat 14C like a grenade, loud enough that passengers 3 rows up turned their heads. 11-year-old Chen sat frozen in the middle seat, her laptop open on the tray table, a coding tutorial paused mid-lesson, her hands hovering over the keyboard as if she'd forgotten how they worked. The boy to her left, maybe 16 with a buzz cut and a smirk that said he'd never faced consequences for anything in his life, was laughing. The other one to her right, slightly younger but meaner somehow, was filming on his phone. Did you hear me? Buzz cut leaned closer, his breath hot against Maya's ear. I said go back to. Please stop, Maya whispered, her voice so small it barely made it past her own lips. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape her chest. I'm not bothering you. I'm just doing my homework. Your homework? The meaner one, the one with the phone, yanked a handful of her braids hard enough to jerk her head back. Nobody wants to see your nappy hair all up in our space. This is first class, not the ghetto. They weren't in first class. They were in economy, row 14, on American Airlines Flight 2156 from Chicago to San Francisco. But geography didn't matter. Truth didn't matter. All that mattered was that Maya was 11 years old, flying alone for the first time in her life to a coding camp she'd worked so hard to get into, and these 2 boys had decided she was their entertainment for the next 4 hours. She'd been so excited this morning. Her dad had driven her to O'Hare at 5 a.m., had walked her all the way to security even though unaccompanied minors weren't technically allowed escorts that far. He'd knelt in the terminal, straightened her backpack straps, made sure she had her inhaler, her charger, her emergency contacts programmed into her phone. You're going to do amazing things at this camp, Maya Bear, he'd said, using the nickname only he was allowed to use. You're the youngest kid they've ever accepted. That's because you're brilliant. Don't let anyone make you forget that. I won't, Daddy, she'd promised. But right now, trapped between these 2 boys who kept touching her hair, kept whispering things that made her skin crawl, kept laughing every time she flinched, Maya was forgetting everything except fear. She reached up, pressed the call button for the flight attendant. The little light dinged on above her seat. Help was coming. Someone would help her. That's what grown-ups did, right? They protected kids. They stopped bullies. They made things right. The flight attendant appeared, a blonde woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a professional smile. Yes, sweetie? What do you need? Maya's voice shook. These boys, they keep touching my hair and saying mean things and... We're not doing anything. Buzz cut interrupted, his voice suddenly innocent, wounded even. She's been hogging the armrests and bumping into us. We asked her nicely to give us some space, and now she's trying to get us in trouble. The flight attendant looked at Maya, then at the boys, then back at Maya. Her smile didn't change, but something in her eyes did. A decision being made. A choice about who to believe. Sweetie, maybe you're being a little too sensitive? Boys will be boys. Just try to ignore them and focus on your computer thing. She walked away. Just walked away. Left Maya sitting there with her heart breaking, and these 2 boys already starting to laugh again because they just learned the most important lesson. Nobody was going to stop them. Have you ever been in a situation where you asked for help and the person who was supposed to protect you chose not to believe you? Where your pain was dismissed as sensitivity, your truth labeled as exaggeration? Drop your story in the comments. Tell us when someone looked at you, asking for help, and decided you weren't worth protecting. And if you think this is just about kids being mean, if you think racism is something people make up to get attention, then maybe you should stop watching now. But if you believe that every child, no matter their skin color, deserves to be safe, deserves to be heard, deserves to have adults stand up for them, then you need to stay right here. Hit that subscribe button for Hyper Racism channel, smash that like button, because what happens to Maya over the next 4 hours will haunt you, will enrage you, will make you question what kind of society we've built where children can be tortured in plain sight and nobody intervenes. Share this with someone who works with children. Share it with someone who's ever looked away when they should have looked closer. Share it with someone who needs to understand that silence isn't neutrality, it's permission. Because those boys weren't done. They were just getting started. And Maya, 11 years old and alone at 35,000 feet, was about to learn exactly how cruel the world could be when nobody was willing to be brave enough to stop it. The flight attendant walked away. The call button light went dark. And in seat 14C, Maya Chen pressed herself as small as she could make herself and prayed for the plane to land soon. But they still had 3 hours and 47 minutes to go. Maya Chen had earned her seat on flight 2156 through merit, through brilliance, through countless hours hunched over her laptop, teaching herself Python and JavaScript while other kids her age were watching TikTok. She'd applied to Stanford's Youth Coding Initiative on a whim, never really believing they'd accept an 11-year-old from Chicago's South Side, a girl who'd learned programming from free YouTube tutorials because her elementary school didn't offer computer science classes. But they had accepted her. Out of 2,000 applicants, they'd chosen 50. And Maya Chen, the girl whose teacher had once told her parents that maybe she should focus on more realistic goals, was one of them. Her father, Marcus Chen, had cried when the acceptance letter came. Real tears, the kind Maya had only seen twice before, once when her grandmother died, and once when Maya's mother left them 3 years ago, deciding that motherhood in Chicago wasn't the life she'd signed up for. Marcus had raised Maya alone since she was 8, working brutal hours as a tech executive while making sure his daughter never missed a parent-teacher conference, never ate dinner alone, never doubted for 1 second that she was loved. He'd saved for months to buy her the laptop she was carrying, the one with enough processing power for the coding camp's requirements. He'd practiced with her what to do if there was turbulence, if she felt sick, if she needed help. He'd made her promise to text him every hour once she landed, to call him before bed, to remember that she was brilliant and brave and capable of anything. But he hadn't prepared her for this. How could he? How do you prepare your 11-year-old daughter for the reality that some people will hate her simply for existing, for taking up space they've decided belongs to them? The boys had started small. Little things. Accidentally kicking her backpack under the seat in front of them, where she couldn't reach it. Spreading out so she had no armrest, no space, pressed against the window like she was trying to disappear into it. Whispering to each other just loud enough for her to hear, "Why do they always have to sit near us? I know, right? Like they can't afford their own section?" Maya had tried to ignore it, the way the flight attendant suggested. Tried to focus on her coding tutorial, on the excitement of the camp waiting for her in San Francisco. But ignoring cruelty doesn't make it stop. It just makes the cruel people bolder. The boys' names, she'd learn later from their boarding passes that fell during the chaos, were Tyler Jenkins and Connor Walsh. Both 16, both from a wealthy suburb north of Chicago called Lake Forest, both traveling to some kind of lacrosse tournament in California. They wore expensive sneakers and designer hoodies, carried the latest iPhones, and had that particular confidence that comes from never having to question whether you belong somewhere. They were the kind of boys who'd grown up hearing that hard work and merit determined success, never recognizing that they'd started the race halfway to the finish line while kids like Maya were still looking for the starting blocks. And that unexamined privilege had curdled into something uglier, a belief that anyone who looked different, who came from different circumstances, who dared to occupy the same spaces they did, must have cheated somehow, must be there by mistake. Tyler, the one with the buzz cut, kept leaning over to look at Maya's laptop screen. "What is that, Chinese?" he sneered, pointing at her code. "Are you cheating on some test or something?" "It's JavaScript," Maya said quietly, trying to angle the screen away. "I'm learning to code." "Sure you are," Connor laughed, the mean one with the phone who kept filming. "Bet your parents paid someone to get you into whatever nerd camp you're going to. That's what you people do, right? Buy your way in." You people. The words that reduced Maya from a name, a person, a brilliant 11-year-old girl with dreams and fears and a father who loved her, into just another faceless member of a group these boys had been taught to resent. The plane hit turbulence, that stomach-dropping kind that makes people gasp. Maya's laptop slid forward on her tray table. Connor reached out lightning fast and tipped her open can of Sprite directly onto the keyboard. "Oops," he said, not sounding sorry at all. Maya watched the liquid seep into the keys, watched her screen flicker and die, watched 3 months of her father's overtime pay destroy itself in real time. Her eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. That laptop was everything. Her schoolwork. Her camp preparation. Her connection to the only world where she felt like she truly belonged. "Please," she whispered, trying to salvage it with napkins, her hands shaking. "Please, why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" Tyler spread his hands innocently. "It was an accident. Maybe you should be more careful with your stuff." A woman across the aisle had watched the whole thing. Maya's eyes met hers, pleading silently for help, for intervention, for someone to say that this wasn't okay. The woman looked away quickly, suddenly fascinated by the in-flight magazine. Another passenger, a businessman in the row ahead, had definitely seen it. He'd turned around when Connor tipped the soda and had witnessed the deliberate cruelty. But he just shook his head slightly and went back to his work, earbuds firmly in place, building a wall between himself and the problem unfolding behind him. Maya pressed the call button again. The same flight attendant appeared, her smile thinner now, more strained. "Sweetie, you really need to stop hitting that button. We're very busy preparing for the beverage service." "My laptop," Maya's voice broke. "He spilled soda on it on purpose. I saw him do it. And they keep saying things, calling me names, and I just want them to stop. Please, please make them stop." The flight attendant looked at the ruined laptop, at Connor's innocent expression, at Tyler examining his fingernails like this conversation didn't involve him. She sighed, the sound of someone tired of dealing with children's drama, someone who'd already decided this wasn't worth her time. "Boys, did you spill something on her computer?" "It was turbulence," Connor said smoothly. "The plane bumped and her drink fell. We actually tried to help her, but she got all upset and accused us of doing it on purpose." "See?" The flight attendant looked at Maya with something that might have been pity or might have been annoyance. "It was just an accident, honey. Turbulence happens. Maybe you should put your computer away for now and try to relax. We still have 3 hours to go, and I really need you not to cause any more disruptions." Disruptions? Maya was causing disruptions. Not the boys who were tormenting her. Not the passengers who were witnessing child abuse and choosing silence. The 11-year-old girl begging for help was the problem. The flight attendant walked away again. Tyler and Connor waited exactly 30 seconds before Connor leaned close to Maya's ear and whispered, "Nobody's going to help you. Nobody cares. You might as well just shut up and take it." And the terrible thing was, he was right. In a metal tube at 35,000 feet, surrounded by dozens of adults who could have intervened, who could have said something, who could have demanded the crew take this seriously, Maya Chen was completely alone. Her phone was in her pocket. She could text her father, tell him what was happening. But what could he do from Chicago? And more than that, she didn't want to worry him, didn't want to ruin this opportunity he'd worked so hard to give her by admitting she couldn't handle a simple flight. So she did what Tyler and Connor and the flight attendant and every silent passenger had taught her to do. She made herself smaller. She stayed quiet. She endured. But they still had 2 hours and 43 minutes to go. And those boys were just getting warmed up. The next hour was psychological warfare conducted in whispers and accidents that left no visible marks but carved deep wounds nonetheless. Tyler and Connor had figured out the perfect formula. Cruelty delivered with smiles, abuse wrapped in plausible deniability, torture that left their victim with no proof, no witnesses willing to speak, no adults willing to believe. They took turns. When one seemed to back off, giving Maya a moment to breathe, to hope that maybe it was over, the other would start up again. It was coordinated, deliberate, designed to keep her off balance, to make sure she never had a moment of peace. Connor kept, accidentally, elbowing her in the ribs every time he shifted in his seat. Hard enough to hurt, gentle enough to claim it was unintentional. "Oh, sorry," he'd say with that smirk. "I'm just so cramped in these cheap seats. Maybe if you weren't taking up so much space." Tyler discovered that Maya had her phone in her lap, texting her grandmother, who'd wanted updates on the flight. He snatched it while she was trying to dry her laptop with napkins, tossed it over the seats to Connor like a football. Maya's voice when she asked for it back was barely audible, choked with tears she was fighting desperately not to shed. "Give it back, please. That's mine. Please." "Give what back?" Tyler's eyes were wide with false innocence. I don't have your phone. Connor has it. Please. I need it. My dad. Your dad what? Connor leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. Your dad's not here. Nobody's here for you. You're all alone up here with us, and there's nothing you can do about it. He held the phone just out of her reach, making her stretch for it, then pulled it back at the last second. The game went on for 5 minutes while passengers around them studiously ignored what was happening. Finally, he dropped it in the seat pocket in front of Tyler, and Maya had to reach across both boys to retrieve it, subjecting herself to more whispered comments about her hair, her clothes, her kind, always wanting handouts. She got her phone back. The screen cracked from where Connor had accidentally squeezed too hard. But she got it back. Have you ever been in a situation where asking for help made things worse? Where every time you tried to stand up for yourself, the people hurting you just got more creative, more cruel, more confident that they could do whatever they wanted. That's where Maya was. Trapped. Helpless. Learning in real time that sometimes the world doesn't protect you, no matter how loud you scream. The beverage service came. Tyler ordered a Coke. When the flight attendant moved on, he accidentally knocked the entire cup into Maya's lap. The cold liquid soaked through her jeans, made her jump up instinctively, banging her head on the overhead bin. Oh man, that's so clumsy, Tyler said loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. You really should be more careful. Maya stood in the aisle, soaking wet, head throbbing, laptop destroyed, phone cracked, dignity shredded, and not a single adult moved to help her. The flight attendant who dismissed her twice before simply handed her extra napkins with a look that said this is what you get for being difficult. She cleaned herself up in the bathroom, locked the door, and finally let herself cry. Quiet sobs that she muffled with paper towels because even here, even alone, she'd been taught that her pain was too loud, too much, too inconvenient for the people around her. When she came back, she found that they'd gone through her backpack. Her coding camp acceptance letter was torn in half. Her emergency inhaler was missing, later found in the seat pocket, but only after 20 minutes of Maya panicking about what she'd do if she had an asthma attack. Her grandmother's good luck charm, a jade bracelet that had belonged to her great-grandmother in Taiwan, was gone completely. Where is it? Maya's voice was desperate now, all composure crumbling. Where's my bracelet? That belonged to my great-grandmother. Please. Please give it back. I don't know what you're talking about, Connor said, examining his fingernails. Maybe you lost it. You're pretty careless with your stuff. Tyler was recording now, phone pointed at Maya's face, capturing her distress for whatever social media humiliation they were planning. Say hi to the camera, he taunted. Tell everyone how you're ruining our flight with your drama. Maya did something then that surprised even herself. She looked directly at the camera, her face wet with tears, but her voice steadier than it had been all flight. My name is Maya Chen. I'm 11 years old. I'm on flight 2156 from Chicago to San Francisco. These boys have been hurting me for 2 hours, and nobody will help me. I've asked the flight attendant 3 times. I've asked other passengers with my eyes to please do something. And everyone keeps pretending it's not happening. She paused, looked around the cabin at all the adults who were suddenly very interested in their phones, their books, their drinks. I'm just a kid. I didn't do anything wrong. I just wanted to go to coding camp. But these boys decided I don't belong on this plane, and everyone is letting them teach me that lesson. The camera kept rolling. Connor's smile had frozen on his face. Tyler looked uncertain for the first time, like maybe this wasn't as fun as it had been when she was crying quietly. A man 2 rows up finally spoke. Hey, maybe you guys should leave her alone. Tyler turned on him instantly. Mind your business, old man. She's lying. We haven't done anything to her. I saw you throw her phone, the man said. I saw you go through her bag. That's theft. That's harassment. That's... Prove it, Connor shot back. You got video? Then shut up. The man looked at Maya with something like sympathy, something like shame. But he didn't push further. He tried, and that was apparently enough to salve his conscience. He put his earbuds back in and returned to his movie. Maya sat down, the camera still recording, The boys still smirking, the cabin still silent. And something inside her, something that had been holding on, started to let go. Her breathing got shallow. Her vision started to narrow. The stress, the fear, the betrayal by every adult who should have protected her. It was too much for an 11-year-old body to process. "I don't feel good," she whispered. "Too bad," Connor whispered back. "We've still got an hour left." But Maya was past hearing him, past feeling anything except the overwhelming weight of abandonment, of being failed by every system that promised to keep children safe. Her eyes closed. Her head tilted back against the seat. And somewhere deep in her mind, a switch flipped, the brain's emergency protocol when trauma becomes too much to bear consciously. Tyler poked her arm. "Hey, stop faking." She didn't respond. Didn't move. Her chest was barely rising. Connor's smirk faded. "Dude, I think something's actually wrong." The flight attendant who dismissed Maya 3 times was suddenly very interested now. She rushed over, professional mask slipping to reveal genuine panic underneath. Miss, can you hear me?" Maya's body was there, but Maya wasn't. She'd retreated somewhere deep inside herself, somewhere the boys couldn't reach, somewhere the indifferent adults couldn't hurt her anymore. Her breathing was shallow, her skin pale, her lips slightly blue, not from lack of oxygen but from a nervous system so overwhelmed it had simply shut down. "We need a doctor," the flight attendant called out, her voice sharp with fear that had nothing to do with Maya's well-being and everything to do with liability, lawsuits, and viral videos showing an unconscious child on her watch. "Is there a doctor on board?" An older woman, a pediatrician from Seattle, pushed her way into the aisle. She knelt beside Maya's seat, checked her pulse, her breathing, her pupils. "She's in severe psychological shock. Her vitals are stable, but her body is protecting her from trauma by shutting down consciousness." "What happened to this child?" "I don't know," the flight attendant stammered. "She was fine earlier. These boys said. These boys have been torturing her for 2 hours." The man who'd spoken up earlier was standing now, his voice loud, angry, done with silence. "I watched them. Everyone watched them. They destroyed her laptop, took her phone, went through her belongings, and called her racial slurs. She asked for help multiple times and your crew did nothing." Other passengers were standing now, too, the dam of silence finally breaking now that it was too late to matter. A woman pulled out her phone. "I have video. About 40 minutes of it. I was recording in case something like this happened." In case something like this happened. As if Maya's suffering had been inevitable, as if the best anyone could do was document it rather than stop it. Tyler and Connor had gone white, shrinking back in their seats like they could disappear into the upholstery. The camera was off now, tucked away, evidence of their cruelty suddenly a liability instead of entertainment. "She's lying," Tyler tried weakly. "She's been dramatic this whole flight, trying to get attention." "I have you on video calling her the N-word," the woman with the phone said coldly. "I have you destroying her property. I have you tormenting a child half your size who asked you repeatedly to stop. So no, she's not lying. You're just finally being held accountable." The pilot's voice came over the intercom, crisp with authority. "This is Captain Rodriguez. We're making an emergency descent into San Francisco. Medical personnel will meet us at the gate. Everyone, remain seated and calm." The plane tilted into its descent, the engines changing pitch. Maya remained unconscious, her body's last defense against a world that had proven too cruel to face. The pediatrician stayed with her, monitoring, while the flight attendant radioed ahead with increasing panic in her voice. "We have an 11-year-old unaccompanied minor in medical distress. Yes, possible harassment by other passengers. No, we didn't document it earlier. Yes, I understand this is serious." 30 minutes later, the plane touched down. The seatbelt sign dinged off, but nobody moved. Paramedics boarded first, their equipment clattering, their movements efficient and practiced. They loaded Maya onto a stretcher, still unconscious, still unreachable, her small body looking even smaller under the white sheet they draped over her. As they wheeled her toward the exit, a man pushed past security at the gate. Tall, Asian, wearing an expensive suit that screamed executive, his face a mask of terror that no amount of professional composure could hide. "That's my daughter," he said, his voice breaking on the last word. "That's my Maya." The paramedics paused. The flight crew froze. And Tyler and Connor, who'd spent 2 hours convincing themselves this girl didn't matter, that she had no one important protecting her, watched as Chen, CEO of Chen Technologies, one of the largest tech firms in Silicon Valley, corporate account holder responsible for over $50,000 in annual airline revenue, fell to his knees beside his unconscious daughter. "Baby girl," he whispered, his hand shaking as he touched her face. "Daddy's here. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I wasn't there." The head flight attendant stepped forward, her face pale. "Mr. Chen, we didn't realize." Marcus's head snapped up, his eyes blazing with a fury that made her step back. "You didn't realize what? That she was human? That she deserved protection? That an 11-year-old child being tortured on your aircraft should be taken seriously?" His voice was quiet, deadly. "Or you didn't realize that she had a father with the power to make you answer for this?" The paramedics were moving again, rolling Maya toward the ambulance. Marcus stood, followed, but turned back once to look at the crew, at the passengers filing off shamefaced, at Tyler and Connor trying to blend into the crowd. "Don't go anywhere," he said, his voice carrying absolute authority. "None of you. Security has your names. The FAA will want statements. My lawyers will want statements. And every single person who saw what happened to my daughter and chose to do nothing will have to explain that choice." He disappeared into the ambulance, the doors closing behind him, the vehicle pulling away with lights flashing. And on the jetway, in the plane, in the terminal, people stood in stunned silence, processing what they'd just witnessed. The power shift had been instant, total, devastating. The child they dismissed, ignored, and abandoned had a father who could make billion-dollar companies tremble. The boys who'd tormented her with impunity suddenly faced consequences that extended far beyond their teenage imagination. But none of that mattered to Marcus Chen as he sat in the back of that ambulance, holding his daughter's hand, watching her chest rise and fall, praying she'd wake up and wondering how he'd ever explain to her that the world was supposed to be better than this. Maya woke up in the hospital 2 hours later, her father's hand wrapped around hers, his head bowed like he was praying or crying or both. The fluorescent lights were too bright. Everything was too bright. She blinked, confused, her last clear memory being on the plane with those boys and the soda and nobody helping and, "Daddy." Marcus's head snapped up, his face transforming from devastation to relief so fast it was almost frightening. "Maya. Oh God, Maya. You're awake." He pressed the call button for the nurse, never letting go of her hand. "How do you feel, baby? Does anything hurt?" Everything hurt. But not in ways she could point to on a chart. Not in ways that showed up on X-rays or blood tests. The hurt was deeper, in places that had nothing to do with her body and everything to do with the shattering realization that the world wasn't safe, that adults wouldn't protect you, that being good and polite and following the rules meant nothing if people had already decided you were worth less. "I'm okay," she whispered, because that's what good daughters said, even when they were breaking inside. "No, you're not." Marcus's voice cracked. "And that's okay. You don't have to be okay right now." A doctor came in, checked Maya's vitals, asked questions about her memory, her orientation, and her emotional state. Maya answered mechanically, watching her father's face get tighter with each response, each detail of what had happened on that flight filtering through the clinical questions. When the doctor left, promising to return with discharge papers, Marcus pulled his chair closer to Maya's bed. His jaw was set in that way it got when he was trying not to explode, when he was channeling rage into something more useful than screaming. "Maya, I need you to tell me everything that happened on that plane. And I need you to know that none of it was your fault. None of it." So she told him. Every detail. The names they called her. The laptop they destroyed. The belongings they stole and the bracelet that was still missing. The flight attendant who told her she was too sensitive. The passengers who watched and did nothing. The 2 hours and 43 minutes of being taught that her suffering didn't matter. By the time she finished, Marcus had tears streaming down his face that he didn't bother to wipe away. His hand was shaking around hers. "You pressed the call button," he said, his voice barely controlled. "You asked for help. You did everything right, and they failed you. Every single adult on that plane failed you. Why didn't anyone help me, Daddy?" The question came out small, broken. "I was nice. I said please. I didn't do anything wrong. Why didn't anyone care?" Marcus pulled her into his arms, held her like she was 5 years old again, and the world had just scraped her knee instead of carving out a piece of her soul. "I don't know, baby girl. I don't know. But I promise you, I'm going to make sure this never happens to another child. Ever." Back at the airport, Tyler Jenkins and Connor Walsh sat in separate security offices, their parents having been called, their stories falling apart under questioning that was suddenly very serious. Other passengers had come forward now that there were consequences. Now that silence had become complicity they'd have to answer for. The videos were being downloaded, statements were being taken, and the two boys who'd spent 4 hours convinced they were untouchable were learning a very different lesson. Tyler's mother, Katherine Jenkins, arrived first. Blonde, perfectly styled, wearing the kind of casual wealth that costs more than most people's monthly rent. She stormed into the security office like she was coming to rescue her son from false accusations, like this was all just a misunderstanding that her lawyer could fix. "This is ridiculous," she declared. "My son would never. He's a good kid, honor roll, lacrosse captain. There must be some mistake." "Ma'am, we have video evidence of your son and his friend harassing a minor for over 2 hours, the airport security supervisor said flatly. "Multiple witnesses. The child had to be hospitalized." "She's probably exaggerating. These people always..." Katherine caught herself, but too late. The words hung in the air, completing the sentence everyone heard. "These people always play the victim." "These people?" The supervisor's voice went cold. "Ma'am, your son called an 11-year-old girl racial slurs, destroyed her property, and psychologically tortured her until she lost consciousness. And you're concerned about whether she's exaggerating." Connor's parents arrived next, cut from the same cloth, already talking about lawyers and lawsuits and how dare anyone accuse their son. The families had money, connections, the kind of resources that usually made problems disappear. But this problem had a name, Marcus Chen. And he had more resources, more connections, and absolutely no intention of letting this disappear. Have you ever watched someone realize that their privilege won't save them this time? That the rules they thought didn't apply to them actually apply to them? That's what was happening in those security offices while Maya lay in a hospital bed trying to understand why the world had been so cruel. The airline's corporate office was in full crisis mode. The CEO had been briefed. Legal was assembling. PR was crafting statements. Because Marcus Chen wasn't just any angry parent. He was a corporate account holder whose company spent millions annually on airline travel. He was a tech CEO with a platform, with media connections, with the ability to make this story national news. And he was a father who just watched his daughter pay the price for a society that had taught her that her pain didn't matter. The meeting happened 3 days later in American Airlines' San Francisco corporate office. Marcus had insisted on it, had refused every offer of private settlements, sealed agreements, quiet resolutions. He wanted public accountability, wanted everyone who'd failed his daughter to face what they'd done. The conference room was crowded. The airline CEO, David Morrison. The head of customer relations. 3 lawyers. The flight crew from Flight 2156, including the flight attendant who dismissed Maya 3 times. Airport security. The FAA representative investigating the incident. And at Marcus's insistence, Tyler Jenkins and Connor Walsh, along with their parents. Marcus arrived last, dressed in a sharp suit, his face composed but his eyes carrying a weight that made everyone in that room uncomfortable. He didn't sit down. Instead, he placed his laptop on the table and opened it to a document everyone could see. "This," he said quietly, "is a timeline of everything that happened to my daughter on Flight 2156. It's compiled from witness statements, video evidence, and Maya's own account, which she gave to a child psychologist because she's too traumatized to repeat it to a room full of strangers." He clicked to the first slide. A photo of Maya before the flight, smiling at the airport, excited and nervous, and beautiful in that way 11-year-old girls are before the world teaches them to be afraid. This is who my daughter was 3 days ago. Brilliant. Accepted to Stanford's Youth Coding Initiative as their youngest participant ever. Confident enough to fly alone across the country to pursue her dreams. He paused, his voice thickening. This is who you let those boys destroy. He clicked to the next slide. A hospital photo he shouldn't have shown, but did anyway, because people needed to see. Maya, with monitors attached, unconscious, her face slack and empty in that terrible way that shows a soul in retreat. This is who she is now. A child so traumatized by what happened on your aircraft, under your crew's supervision, in front of dozens of your passengers, that her body shut down as a protective mechanism. Do you understand what that means? Her 11-year-old brain decided that unconsciousness was safer than staying present in the situation you allowed to continue for 2 hours and 43 minutes. Catherine Jenkins started to speak. Mr. Chen, boys will be boys, and I'm sure your daughter is a lovely girl, but... Stop. Marcus's voice cut like a scalpel. If the next words out of your mouth are anything other than an apology, I suggest you reconsider. Your son called my daughter the N-word. He destroyed property. He stole from her. He physically intimidated her. And she asked for help 3 separate times. He turned to the flight attendant, who'd gone pale. And you told her she was being too sensitive. You told her to ignore them. You dismissed a child in distress because it was easier than confronting 2 white teenagers. The flight attendant's voice was barely audible. I didn't realize it was that serious. They seemed like good kids. She seemed like she was overreacting. Marcus repeated the words slowly, letting them hang in the air like an indictment. A child asks you for help 3 times, shows you destroyed property, has visible distress written all over her face, and you decide she's overreacting. Based on what? Based on the color of her skin, making her seem less credible than the white boys sitting next to her? The silence in the room was absolute. Marcus clicked to the next slide. The video footage, edited together from 3 different passengers' phones. The room watched in horrified silence as Tyler and Connor tormented Maya, as she begged them to stop, as the flight attendant walked away, as passenger after passenger looked away. When it ended, Connor's mother was crying. Tyler's father had his head in his hands. The airline CEO looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on Earth. I could sue, Marcus said quietly. I could take this to every media outlet in the country. I could make sure American Airlines becomes synonymous with child endangerment and racial discrimination. I could destroy the futures of those 2 boys with a few phone calls. He paused. But that's not what my daughter needs. That's not what any child needs. He looked at Tyler and Connor, who couldn't meet his eyes. You're 16 years old. Old enough to know better. Old enough to understand that what you did was torture. That you targeted my daughter because you thought she was vulnerable, alone, and that nobody would protect her. You were right about that last part. Nobody protected her. But that doesn't make what you did acceptable. It makes everyone in this room complicit. Tyler was crying now, real tears, the kind that come when someone finally understands the weight of what they've done. I'm sorry, he choked out. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to, You were just what? Marcus's voice was steel. Having fun? Teaching her a lesson about where she belongs? Reminding her that even in 2024, there are people who see her brown skin and decide she's worth less. Connor spoke up, his voice shaking. We know it was wrong. We know we can't take it back. But we want to make it right. We want to apologize to Maya. To do whatever it takes to. You don't get to apologize to my daughter, Marcus said firmly. You don't get access to her ever again. What you can do is learn from this. Really learn, not just mouth words to make this go away. You can become the kind of men who would have stopped yourselves. Who would have stood up if you saw someone else doing what you did. He turned to David Morrison, the airline CEO. Your airline failed my daughter catastrophically. Your crew failed. Your policies failed. Your passengers failed. This isn't about one flight attendant making a bad call. This is about a system that doesn't protect vulnerable passengers, that doesn't take harassment seriously, that allows children to be tortured because it's easier than confronting bad actors. David cleared his throat. Mr. Chen, we take full responsibility for what happened. We're implementing immediate changes. I'm not finished. Marcus's voice was quiet but absolute. I'm going to tell you what happens next. Not what I want. What will happen? Because my daughter deserves it. Because every child who flies on your airline deserves it. He pulled out a document and slid it across the table. These are my requirements. Non-negotiable. Mandatory harassment training for all crew members, developed in partnership with civil rights organizations. A zero-tolerance policy for passengers who abuse minors. Lifetime bans, no exceptions. An upstander program, where you actively teach passengers how to intervene safely when they witness cruelty. And a public apology, not to me, but to every child who's ever been failed the way Maya was. And if we don't agree? David asked quietly. Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Then I go public with everything. The videos. The statements. The fact that your airline let a child be tortured for nearly 3 hours. And I use every resource I have to make sure parents think twice before putting their children on your planes. Your choice. David looked at his lawyers, who nodded grimly. We agree to your terms. Marcus finally sat down, the adrenaline that had been holding him together starting to fade. The boys are banned from your airline for life. The flight crew faces disciplinary action. I'll leave the specifics to you, but it needs to be real consequences, not a slap on the wrist. And this incident gets reported to the FAA with full transparency. He stood to leave, paused at the door. My grandmother came to this country in 1974. She worked herself to death so my father could have opportunities. My father worked himself to death so I could have opportunities. And I've spent my entire career working so my daughter could have a world where her brilliance mattered more than her skin color. His voice broke. And in 2 hours and 43 minutes, you taught her that none of that work mattered. That she's still just a target. Still disposable. Still not worth protecting. He looked at Tyler and Connor one last time. I hope you spend the rest of your lives proving you're better than the worst thing you've ever done. I hope you become men who would have protected a girl like Maya instead of destroying her. But right now, you're just 2 boys who tortured a child and taught her that the world is crueler than she ever imagined. Marcus walked out, leaving a room full of people drowning in their own complicity, their own silence, their own failure to be brave when bravery costs something. And somewhere across the city, Maya sat in her father's apartment, staring at a computer screen she couldn't bring herself to code on anymore, wondering if she'd ever feel safe in the world again. Within 48 hours of the meeting, American Airlines issued a public statement that made national news. Not the usual corporate non-apology, not the carefully worded statement designed to admit nothing while appearing concerned. This was different. This was real. We failed Maya Chen. We failed her parents. We failed every passenger who witnessed what happened and every child who will ever fly alone on our aircraft. What occurred on Flight 2156 represents a catastrophic breakdown in our duty to protect vulnerable passengers, and we take full responsibility. The statement went on to detail the reforms Marcus had demanded, now being implemented across the entire airline. The upstander program. The zero-tolerance policy. The mandatory training. But it was the final paragraph that went viral, that got shared millions of times across social media. To Maya Chen, you did nothing wrong. You were brave. You asked for help. You deserved protection. We failed you, and no amount of policy changes can undo that failure. But we promise that your suffering will mean something. That because of your courage in telling your story, other children will be safer. Thank you for making us better, even though you never should have had to. Tyler Jenkins and Connor Walsh were banned for life from American Airlines and all partner carriers. Their names appeared on the FAA's no-fly list. But the consequences went deeper than that. The video from the flight had leaked, their faces visible, their cruelty documented in high definition. It went viral in that particular way that ruins lives. Shared across Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, with their names, their schools, their families' information all attached. These are the faces of racism, the captions read. These are the boys who tortured an 11-year-old until she passed out. Tyler's lacrosse scholarship to Northwestern was revoked. Connor's early acceptance to Duke was rescinded. Their high school held an emergency assembly about the incident, using them as cautionary tales without naming them, though everyone knew exactly who they were talking about. The social exile was immediate and total. Former friends stopped answering texts. Girls they'd dated posted screenshots of past racist comments they'd made, jokes they'd laughed at, patterns of behavior that suddenly made sense in this new context. They couldn't go to the grocery store without being recognized, couldn't attend their own school without whispers following them down hallways. Catherine Jenkins lost her position on the country club board. Connor's father's law firm quietly suggested he might want to find other opportunities. The families that had once welcomed them at dinner parties suddenly had scheduling conflicts. Money and connections could insulate you from a lot of things, but not from viral video evidence of your child torturing another child. The flight attendant, whose name was Sarah Mitchell, was placed on indefinite leave pending investigation. She issued her own statement, tearful and public, acknowledging that she'd failed in the most fundamental way an adult can fail a child. I saw a situation that made me uncomfortable, and instead of protecting Maya, I protected my own comfort. I dismissed her because believing her would have required me to confront those boys, to create conflict, to risk being seen as difficult or overreacting. I chose the easy path, and an 11-year-old girl paid the price for my cowardice. Have you ever wondered how many people have to fail before a child gets hurt? How many adults have to look away, stay silent, choose comfort over courage? The answer from Flight 2156 was, too many. Way too many. But something else was happening too, something quieter but potentially more profound. Passengers who'd been on that flight started speaking out, not to defend themselves but to confess their own failure. A businessman wrote an op-ed titled, "I watched a child be tortured and did nothing." A mother posted on Facebook about explaining to her daughter why she'd stayed silent when she should have stood up. "I was afraid," one passenger wrote. Afraid of confrontation, afraid of making things awkward, afraid of being wrong about what I was seeing. And because of my fear, an 11-year-old girl suffered alone. I have to live with that. But more importantly, I have to be better. We all have to be better. The conversation spread beyond the flight, beyond this one incident. Schools started implementing bystander intervention training. Airlines across the industry began reviewing their policies. Parents talked to their children about what it means to stand up for others, about the difference between being a witness and being an upstander. And in a therapist's office in San Francisco, Maya Chen sat in a comfortable chair, her father beside her, trying to process trauma that would take months or years to fully heal. Her grandmother's jade bracelet had been found, turned in anonymously to the airport lost and found 3 days after the incident. Someone's conscience, perhaps, finally catching up with their actions. But some things couldn't be returned so easily. Maya's excitement about coding camp had dimmed. Her trust in adults had been shattered. Her belief that the world was fundamentally fair and kind had been replaced with something harder, sadder, more realistic. The question everyone was asking was whether justice had been served. Tyler and Connor faced consequences. The airline had reformed its policies. The flight attendant had been disciplined. But was that enough? Could any punishment equal the psychological damage done to an 11-year-old girl who'd learned that her suffering didn't matter to the people supposed to protect her? Marcus didn't know the answer. He just knew that his daughter was hurting, that she'd been failed by a system that should have kept her safe, and that no amount of corporate apologies or lifetime bans could give her back the innocence she'd lost at 35,000 feet. But he also knew something else. Maya was strong. She was a fighter. And she had him, had her grandmother, had a therapist who specialized in childhood trauma, had a community rallying around her. She would heal. Slowly, painfully, imperfectly. But she would heal. The question was, would the world that had hurt her heal too? Would this moment of reckoning lead to lasting change, or would people's attention move on to the next viral story, leaving the hard work of actually protecting vulnerable children undone? Only time would tell. But for now, at least, Maya Chen's name meant something. It meant that children's voices matter. That silence is complicity. Those systems change when people demand it loudly enough. And in that therapist's office, as Maya worked through the trauma piece by piece, her father held her hand and promised her something he hoped he could deliver, that her suffering would mean something. That other children would be safer because she'd been brave enough to tell her truth. It was a heavy burden for an 11-year-old to carry. But Maya was strong enough to carry it. She'd already proven that by surviving. 3 months after the incident, Maya sat in her father's home office, her new laptop open in front of her, a replacement for the one destroyed on the flight, but also somehow more than that. A symbol. A reclaiming. The screen glowed with lines of code, a program she was building for the upstander initiative American Airlines had implemented based on her experience. Marcus watched from the doorway, not wanting to interrupt, but unable to look away. His daughter was coding again. After weeks of that laptop sitting untouched on her desk, after sessions with Dr. Patricia Kim where Maya had cried about feeling broken, about not being able to do the thing she loved most because it reminded her of that flight, she was finally coding again. "It's an app," Maya said without looking up, sensing her father's presence the way children do. "For reporting harassment on flights. Anonymous, so people don't have to be afraid of confrontation. But with video upload capability, there's evidence. And it goes directly to the captain and ground security, bypassing flight attendants who might dismiss it." Marcus's throat tightened. His daughter, who'd been tortured until she lost consciousness, was building a tool to protect other children from the same fate. "That's brilliant, Maya Bear. Dr. Kim said I should turn my pain into purpose." Maya finally looked up, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there before the flight. A hardness, a wariness, but also a determination. "I can't undo what happened to me. But maybe I can stop it from happening to someone else." She was 11 years old and talking like a veteran activist, like someone who'd learned too young that the world required constant vigilance, that safety wasn't a given but something you had to fight for, build systems for, code protections into because human kindness wasn't reliable enough on its own. Later that evening, they sat together on the back porch of their home in Palo Alto, watching the sun set over the bay. It had become their ritual, these quiet moments where they could just be father and daughter without the weight of the incident hanging between them. "Daddy." Maya's voice was small. "Do you think those boys understand what they did to me?" Marcus considered the question carefully. Tyler and Connor had both written apology letters, lengthy, detailed, seemingly genuine expressions of remorse that their therapists and parents had probably helped craft. But did they truly understand? Did 16-year-olds who'd grown up insulated by privilege and whiteness really grasp what it meant to make an 11-year-old girl feel so unsafe that her body shut down? "I think they're sorry they got caught," he said honestly. "I think they're sorry their lives got harder. Whether they understand the depth of what they took from you, I don't know, baby. I hope so. But I can't know what's in their hearts. I used to think people were basically good," Maya said quietly. "That if you were nice and followed the rules and asked politely, people would help you. But that's not true, is it? People are basically comfortable. And they'll choose their comfort over your safety almost every time." Marcus pulled his daughter close, his heart breaking at the cynicism in her voice, at the lesson she'd learned too young. "Some people, but not all people. The woman who recorded the video even though she was scared. The man who finally spoke up. The passengers who came forward afterward, even though it made them look bad. They chose courage over comfort, eventually." "Eventually," Maya repeated. "After I'd already passed out. After it was too late." "Yes," Marcus acknowledged. "After it was too late. And that's the part we have to change, Maya. That's why your app matters. That's why the Upstander program matters. We have to make it easier for people to be brave earlier, not just after the damage is done." They sat in silence for a while, the sky turning from orange to purple to deep blue. Then Maya spoke again, her voice steadier now. "I'm going to coding camp next summer. The one I was supposed to go to this year." Marcus's hand tightened on her shoulder. "Are you sure? We don't have to." "I'm sure." Maya's jaw was set in that way that reminded Marcus of her grandmother, the woman who'd fled persecution in Taiwan only to face discrimination in America, who'd built a life anyway, who taught her family that survival meant refusing to let cruelty make you smaller. Those boys tried to teach me that I don't belong in spaces like that. That I should be scared to take up space, to pursue my dreams, to exist in places they've decided are theirs. But you know what? What's that, baby? They were wrong. I do belong. And I'm going to keep coding, keep learning, keep taking up every space I've earned the right to occupy. Because that's what Grandma would have done. That's what she did do. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face, pride and pain mixing into something he didn't have words for. His daughter had been broken by what happened on that flight. But she was putting herself back together, and the person she was becoming was somehow both more fragile and stronger than before. Your grandmother would be so proud of you, he whispered. She marched in the 60s, you know, for civil rights. For the belief that the world could be better than it was. She faced dogs and fire hoses and people who hated her for demanding equality. And nothing's changed, Maya said bitterly. We're still fighting the same fights. Some things have changed, Marcus countered gently. There are laws now that didn't exist then. Policies. Protections. Are they enough? Obviously not, or you wouldn't have suffered what you suffered. But they exist because people like your grandmother refused to accept that cruelty was just the way things were. And things will keep changing because people like you refuse to accept it too. Maya leaned into her father's embrace, still so small despite her growing wisdom. I don't want to be a symbol, Daddy. I don't want to be that girl from the plane for the rest of my life. You're not a symbol. You're my daughter. You're Maya Chen, brilliant coder, lover of boba tea and terrible puns, future changer of the world. He kissed the top of her head. What happened to you was real and terrible and wrong. But it doesn't define you. You get to decide who you are. Not those boys. Not that flight attendant. Not anyone who ever underestimated you or dismissed you or decided you were worth less because of how you look. Do you really believe that? Maya asked. That I get to decide who I am? I believe it with everything in me, Marcus said fiercely. And I believe that every time you code, every time you pursue your dreams, every time you walk into a room and take up space like you own it, you're proving that their cruelty didn't win. That you're stronger than their hate. The stars were coming out now, pinpricks of light in the vast darkness. Maya counted them the way she used to as a little girl, the way her grandmother had taught her, finding patterns in the chaos, making sense of the infinite. Daddy? Can I ask you something? Anything, baby. Do you think racism will ever end? Like, really end, not just get better but actually be gone? Marcus was quiet for a long time, weighing truth against hope, realism against the optimism he wanted to give his daughter. I don't know if it will end completely. Prejudice it's complicated. It's taught and learned and reinforced by systems that benefit from division. But I do know this. Every person who chooses courage over comfort, every system that gets reformed, every child who grows up learning to stand up instead of stay silent, that's progress. Slow, imperfect, frustrating progress. But progress nonetheless. So we just keep fighting? Maya asked. Forever. We keep fighting, Marcus confirmed. But we also keep living, keep loving, keep building lives so beautiful that the haters can't touch them. We fight by refusing to be broken. By being exactly who we are, unapologetically, in every space we choose to occupy. Maya nodded slowly, processing this, adding it to the growing collection of hard truths she was learning to carry. Then that's what I'll do. I'll keep coding. I'll keep learning. I'll go to that camp next summer and I'll be so good they can't deny I belong there. That's my girl, Marcus whispered, his voice thick with emotion. That's exactly what you'll do. And in that moment, sitting on their back porch under emerging stars, both of them healing from a trauma that would never fully disappear, they made a silent pact. The world had hurt Maya. Had failed her. Had taught her cruel lessons about belonging and worth and the limits of adult protection. But it hadn't destroyed her. And they weren't going to let it. 1 year after Flight 2156, Maya Chen stood on a stage at a TEDx youth conference in San Francisco. She was 12 now, taller, her voice steadier, but her eyes still carried the weight of what she'd survived. Behind her, a screen displayed the title of her talk, The Code of Courage, How Bystanders Become Upstanders. A year ago, I was tortured on an airplane for 2 hours and 43 minutes, she began, her voice clear and unwavering. 2 boys decided I didn't belong in my seat, and dozens of adults decided my suffering wasn't worth their discomfort. I passed out from trauma. I woke up in a hospital. And I learned that sometimes the world is crueler than an 11-year-old should have to understand. The audience was silent, captivated. But I also learned something else. That one person's courage can change everything. The woman who recorded the video even though she was scared. The man who finally spoke up even though he was outnumbered. The passengers who came forward afterward even though it meant admitting they'd failed. They taught me that bravery isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and choosing to act anyway. She clicked to the next slide, showing her app, now used by 3 major airlines, downloaded over 100,000 times, credited with stopping harassment on dozens of flights. I turn my pain into code, into a tool that makes it easier for people to be brave. Because that's what we need, not perfection, not heroes, just ordinary people willing to speak up when they see something wrong. The applause when she finished was thunderous. But more importantly, people were downloading her app in real time, sharing her story, promising to be better bystanders. Marcus watched from the front row, tears streaming down his face, thinking about his mother who'd marched in the 60s, his daughter who was coding solutions in the 2020s. Different battles, different tools, same fight for a world where children could be safe. After the talk, a young black boy approached Maya shyly. I'm flying alone next month for the first time. I'm scared. Maya knelt to his level, just like her father always did for her. It's okay to be scared. But remember, you belong on that plane. You belong everywhere you choose to be. And if anyone tries to make you feel otherwise, you speak up. You keep speaking up until someone hears you. Promise. Promise, the boy whispered. And in that moment, Maya understood what her father had been trying to tell her. That healing wasn't about forgetting what happened. It was about making sure it meant something. That her suffering could light a path for someone else. That courage was contagious if you were brave enough to share it. Now here's what we want to know from you. Do you think racial discrimination and prejudice can truly end? Not just improve over time, but actually be eradicated from our society? What do you think needs to happen to curb it? More laws, better education, cultural shifts, all of the above. Do you think serving justice to people like Tyler and Connor is enough to end racism? Or does it take something deeper, something that changes not just individual behavior but the systems that allow discrimination to thrive? Tell us your honest opinion in the comments below. Share your own experiences of witnessing harassment and choosing to speak up, or staying silent and wishing you hadn't. Tell us about the moment you decided to be an upstander instead of a bystander. What would you have done if you'd been on flight 2156? Would you have been the person who recorded the evidence, who confronted the boys, who demanded the crew take action? Or would you have been someone who looked away, who convinced yourself it wasn't your business, who regretted your silence later? Be honest with yourself. That honesty is the first step toward being better. And if you want racism to become a thing of the past in our country and world at large, if you want to be like Maya Chen, turning trauma into tools, pain into purpose, using your voice and your skills to protect others, then share this video right now. Subscribe to this channel. Hit that like button. Because together, one story at a time, one act of courage at a time, one person refusing to stay silent at a time, we can build a world where every child is safe. Where every voice is heard. Where belonging isn't something you have to fight for. It's something you're given freely, simply because you're human. Thank you for watching Maya's story. Thank you for caring enough to make it to the end. Thank you for being part of the solution instead of part of the silence. Share this with someone who works with children. With someone who travels frequently. With someone who needs to understand that bystanders have power. The power to intervene, to document, to demand accountability. With someone who's ever felt small and needs to be reminded that their voice matters. Maya Chen is thriving now. She's coding. She's healing. She's changing the aviation industry one line of code at a time. And Tyler and Connor? They're reminders that actions have consequences, that cruelty eventually costs you everything, that you can't hide behind privilege when the whole world is watching. But more importantly, this story is a reminder that you have a choice every single day. To speak up or stay silent. To protect or ignore. To be the person who makes the world safer or the person who makes it more dangerous through your inaction. The question is, which person will you choose to be? The choice, as always, is yours. And somewhere in San Francisco, a 12-year-old girl who survived hell at 35,000 feet is building a future where no child has to survive what she did. Where courage is louder than cruelty. Where belonging is a birthright, not something you have to code into existence. But she can't do it alone. She needs you. We all need you. So what will it be? Will you be an upstander? Or will you be another silent witness to someone else's suffering? Choose courage. Choose always.